Have you ever sat in a quiet room and realized no one is calling anymore? The phone used to ring. Your children used to need you. Birthdays, holidays, doctor appointments. There was always something, always someone to talk to. But lately, the silence feels louder, doesn't it? You start to wonder, did they forget me? Or worse, am I no longer important to them? If you've ever felt that way, I want you to know something right from the start. You are not alone. This is a quiet ache that so many parents carry, especially later in life. But just because it's common doesn't mean it's acceptable. You gave your heart, your years, your care. You raised them. And now that they've drifted, or even pushed you away, it's not wrong to want them to see your worth again. But here's where we shift the story. Today is not about chasing anyone's approval. It's about flipping the script, quietly, confidently, and showing your child something they never expected. The strength of your absence, the elegance of your independence, and the undeniable truth that it is they who are missing out, not you. In this video, we're going to talk about something powerful, something that can restore your sense of peace and, surprisingly, make your child realize just how much they need you, without you ever having to say a word. It's not about guilt tripping or playing mind games. It's about embracing a timeless way of living, one that helps us stay calm, grounded, and full of quiet dignity, even when others don't see our value. Let's begin where many of us find ourselves, trying too hard to stay involved. You send a message, no reply. You suggest a visit, and they're too busy. You offer to help, and they politely decline. So you try again. You reach out more. You offer more. But the more you give, the less they seem to want. And that, my friend, is one of the hardest truths we'll ever face. Because as painful as it sounds, what is freely given is often taken for granted. That's not just your story, it's human nature. We all fall into it. But here's the beauty. Human nature also has another side. The moment something, or someone, we thought would always be there suddenly isn't, we begin to feel the emptiness they leave behind. That's where your strength begins. It's time to step back, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of quiet wisdom. It's time to become what I like to call a powerful absence. Think of it like this. Imagine a lamp that's always on in the corner of a room. At first it's comforting. Then it becomes background. People stop noticing it. But the moment that light goes out, really out, suddenly, everyone feels the darkness. They notice what's missing. You can become that light. Not by flickering for attention, but by stepping back with grace. When you stop offering your presence so freely, your child will start to feel something they haven't in a while, the weight of your absence, the warmth that's missing, the stability they once leaned on, even if they never said it out loud. And here's where this mindset becomes your greatest ally. Because this isn't about punishing them. It's not about silence for the sake of control. It's about mastering your own emotions. True peace doesn't come from changing other people. It comes from changing how we respond to them. You don't have to explain your pain. You don't have to ask why they've grown cold. You don't even need them to say sorry. What you do need is to reclaim your own space. To say, with your actions, I am still here, but I am no longer chasing what isn't reaching back. That's the beginning of true strength. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What if they don't notice? What if they go on living their lives and I just fade away? That fear is real. It creeps in at night when you lie awake wondering if they even care. But here's what I've seen, time and time again. People notice silence more than noise. They notice when the pattern breaks. When the one who always called stops calling. They may not react right away. They may not say anything at first. But believe me, they'll feel it. Because when someone has built their life knowing you're always a phone call away, the silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels hollow. So instead of using your energy to reach toward them, I want you to turn that energy inward. Take a walk every morning and don't check your phone afterward. Read that book you've been putting off. Visit the local market just because you can. Do something creative. It might feel strange at first, maybe even selfish, but it's not. It's healing, and it's necessary. Because when you start living for yourself again, something magical happens. You begin to glow in a way that others notice. You carry yourself differently. You speak less, but say more. And slowly, without fanfare, you become unforgettable. Not because you demanded to be seen, but because your quiet absence has become louder than any words ever could. The child who took you for granted will begin to wonder, why haven't they reached out? Why do I feel this gap I didn't expect? And most importantly, did I make a mistake letting them go? That's the moment you're working toward. Not a moment of revenge, a moment of truth. A moment when they finally look at you, not as someone who begged to be loved, but as someone who was always worthy and who walked away with dignity intact. Now take a breath. Let that sink in. This isn't a game. This isn't manipulation. This is self-respect. This is the first quiet step in teaching your child that your love was not an entitlement. It was a blessing. And if they want it again, they'll have to reach for you. Because from now on, you are not chasing anyone. You are choosing you. And that changes everything. Let's keep going. There's more to say. So now that you've taken that first step back, away from the chasing, the explaining, the endless trying, something inside you is already beginning to shift. It might be subtle. It might even feel a little lonely at first. That's okay. Silence isn't empty, not when it's chosen with intention. What you're doing is creating space, not just for your child to think, but for you to grow. And I want you to know, that space isn't a punishment. It's a sacred pause. It's where your strength gathers. You see, when you've spent years, maybe even decades, pouring your love, your energy, your time into raising children, it's only natural to feel disoriented when that role begins to fade. The house is quieter, the calls less frequent. Sometimes the only thing louder than the silence is the wondering. Did I do something wrong? But here's a truth that often gets buried under that self-blame. You can love someone deeply and still decide to stop making yourself small to stay in their lives. That's not abandonment. That's wisdom. You are not here to prove your worth. You already did that. With every school lunch packed, every tear wiped, every sacrifice made without complaint. And yet, here you are, still feeling like you have to convince your child that you matter. But what if you didn't have to? What if the answer isn't convincing them, but rediscovering yourself? Let me tell you something that might surprise you. The less you try to be noticed, the more unforgettable you become. People are drawn to confidence, not arrogance, but that quiet, grounded sense of self that says, I'm whole, with or without your attention. The truth is, the person with the calmest mind holds the most power. It's not the one who yells or pleads or demands to be heard. It's the one who doesn't need to speak to be understood. So if your child has taken you for granted, it's not your job to chase them until they notice. Your job now is to become so rooted in your own life, your own peace, that they are the ones who feel the imbalance. Because they will. Eventually, they always do. But here's the important part. Don't do this just for them to notice. That's the trap. If you step back just to be missed, you're still tying your value to their reaction. What I'm asking you to do is deeper than that. Step back because you are reclaiming your time. Step back because you're tired of feeling invisible in a life you helped create. Step back because you deserve peace, and peace doesn't live in constant reaching. Now, while you're holding this silence, this noble kind of silence, there will be moments when the urge to reach out comes rushing in. Maybe you'll remember something funny your grandchild said. Maybe you'll see an old photo and think, maybe I should send a quick message. Don't shame yourself for feeling that. Love doesn't turn off like a switch. But pause before you act. Ask yourself, am I reaching out because I truly want to connect? Or because I want to be reassured I still matter? If it's the second one, take a deep breath. Go on that walk. Call a friend who listens without judgment. Write in a journal. Let the moment pass. Because your dignity is worth more than a half-hearted text back. Now let's talk about something even more powerful. Movement. Not emotional movement, actual movement. When you begin investing in your body, your routines, your energy again, something amazing happens. You become magnetic. You show, not tell, that your life didn't end when someone else stopped showing up. Go try that new Tai Chi class at the community center. Plant something in the garden that will bloom next season. Take a class online. Volunteer. Learn something that scares you a little. Not to stay busy. Anyone can stay busy. But to stay alive. Because nothing unsettles the person who let you go more than seeing you rise without their attention. It's not about revenge. It's about resonance. When you thrive, not just survive, your child will feel something they haven't in a long time, the sting of absence. They'll start to wonder why your voice has gone quiet. They'll feel the change in the air. And at first, they might resist it. Pride is stubborn. But silence, especially dignified silence, has a way of echoing louder than words ever could. And when that call finally comes, and yes, it often does, it may be casual. Just checking in. Saw something that reminded me of you. Don't rush to fill the space. Let them do the reaching. Let them feel the weight of the distance they created. You don't need to rub it in. Just be. Remember, you are not here to lecture them back into love. You're here to remind yourself that love, in its truest form, is never one-sided. And if it was, maybe it wasn't love at all. It was dependency disguised as devotion. But not anymore. You've stepped into a new chapter, one where your presence is earned, not assumed. One where you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. One where you don't have to be invited to feel like you belong. You belong to yourself now. And the beauty is, when you no longer need anyone to complete your story, that's when people start begging to be part of it. So breathe. You've already begun the hardest part, letting go. Not of your child, not of your love, but of the illusion that you must constantly prove you're worthy of being remembered. You've always been worthy. Now it's time they remember that too. Let's keep going. You're doing beautifully. There's something powerful about watching yourself grow past the point where you used to wait. You may not realize it yet, but every quiet day you spend focusing on your own well-being. Every evening you choose peace over worry. Every time you resist the urge to reach out for reassurance, that's growth. That's strength. And it's no small thing. In fact, it might be the most important chapter you've lived in a long time. Now let's talk about the moment that catches most people off guard. The moment when your child, who once kept you at a distance, starts reaching out again. Maybe it's subtle at first. A text you didn't expect. A question they never used to ask. Maybe they notice you're not so quick to reply, or that you seem lighter somehow, more focused on your own path. And whether they admit it or not, they feel it. They feel that the old version of you, the one who used to be readily available, always giving, always waiting, is no longer there. And now, something's changed. You've changed. But this is where the real test begins. Because when the attention comes back, it's tempting to lean right into it. To soften the boundaries you've built. To say yes when what you really mean is maybe. After all, part of you has been waiting for this. But take a breath. Pause. And ask yourself, am I returning because I feel truly seen? Or because I'm still chasing the old dream of being needed? There's no shame in wanting to reconnect. In fact, that's part of healing too. But this time, you don't return as the version of you that once felt small. You return from a place of choice, of strength. You decide what kind of relationship you're willing to have and what you're no longer willing to accept. That's what it means to become the prize. You're no longer available just because someone called. You're available because it aligns with your values, your peace, your new rhythm of life. You don't entertain guilt trips or half-hearted conversations. You hold yourself with the quiet dignity of someone who knows their worth, someone who isn't afraid to walk alone if the company doesn't match their peace. And that's when your child truly sees you, not just as mom or dad, but as a human being with needs, with boundaries, with a full life outside of them. That might be uncomfortable for them at first, especially if they've grown used to the idea that your life revolved around theirs. But over time, that discomfort becomes respect. And respect lasts longer than convenience ever will. You're not here to win anyone back. You're here to remember who you are without needing anyone else's permission. And the irony of it all, the beautiful twist, is that when you become that kind of person, the one who no longer waits, the one who moves with purpose, who stands tall in their solitude, that's when the world starts leaning towards you. Your child begins to ask real questions, not out of politeness but out of genuine interest. They start to reflect, maybe even apologize, not because you demanded it, but because your silence gave them space to hear their own thoughts. And if that moment never comes, you'll still be okay. Because the reward was never in them coming back. The reward was in watching yourself rise. Let's not forget, true transformation isn't flashy. It's not about suddenly changing your clothes or announcing your independence with grand gestures. No, real change happens quietly. You wake up one morning and realize you don't feel the urge to check your messages. You no longer rehearse conversations that never happen. You're not living in the past. You're planting the garden for next spring. And something deep inside you whispers, I'm proud of who I'm becoming. That's the voice you listen to now. You don't need anyone else to echo it. You are not an old chapter in someone else's story. You are still writing your own. And if your child, eventually, wants to be part of it, that's a choice they'll have to make. But this time, they'll have to meet you where you are. Because you're not going back. You're not shrinking. You're not pretending. You're done trying to fit into a space that couldn't hold the full version of who you've become. Now take this truth with you. The one who begs for nothing ends up being wanted the most. Not because they played games, but because they finally stopped playing altogether. It's not about being cold. It's not about punishing anyone. It's about refusing to lose yourself just to be remembered. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are just beginning a chapter where you come first, not out of spite, but out of love, self-love. And that kind of love has a ripple effect. It touches everyone around you, even the ones who once thought they could do without you. You've planted a seed in silence. Now let the roots grow. And if one day your child reaches out, not out of guilt, but out of real understanding, you'll be ready. But this time, you'll meet them not from a place of waiting, but from a place of strength. Because you have nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to explain. Just a life that keeps blooming, one quiet, powerful day at a time. You're doing beautifully. Let's carry that into every choice you make from here on out. There comes a time when the story shifts, not because the past disappears, but because you stop carrying it the same way. You've stepped away from old patterns. You've started to protect your peace. You've begun to live more for yourself and less through the lens of how others treat you. And now, something remarkable is happening. You're no longer waiting for your child to change. You're simply changing the way you live without needing them to. But let's be honest, even with all this strength, there are still days when doubt creeps in. Maybe it's a birthday they forget, a holiday that comes and goes without a call. Maybe you see another family out together and feel that ache again, that longing for the connection you once had. That's human. That's love. But that doesn't mean you go backward. In those moments, I want you to remember, you can miss someone deeply and still honor yourself. Missing someone isn't weakness, but abandoning yourself just to be closer to them, that is. So instead of focusing on who isn't reaching out, shift your attention to who you are becoming. Because that version of you, the one who walks with quiet strength, who no longer begs, who carries dignity in their silence, is not just surviving. You're becoming someone unforgettable. And this is the part many people never reach. They stay trapped in the waiting room of maybe. Maybe they'll call. Maybe they'll regret it. Maybe they'll change. But a whole life can pass in that waiting room. And I don't want that for you. You deserve better than maybe. The moment you let go of that need for recognition, you finally take full authorship of your story. And the truth is, the more you evolve without them, the more powerful your presence becomes. Even in your absence, your growth speaks louder than words ever could. Now here's something important to remember. You don't need closure from someone else to move forward. Closure isn't something you get. It's something you create. You create it by living well, by choosing joy in small things, by laughing again, even when no one's watching, by finding new meaning in your days. And if that sounds too simple, just ask yourself, how would your life change if you stopped waiting for them to see your worth and started seeing it for yourself? Imagine that. Imagine waking up tomorrow and deciding that your peace no longer depends on anyone's apology, that your smile doesn't wait on anyone's approval, that your value is non-negotiable, even if your child never puts it into words. That's not fantasy. That's your new reality, if you want it. And here's the beautiful twist. When you reach this place, that's often when they do come back. Not because you begged, not because you pressured, but because they felt the shift. Because they looked back and saw something they didn't know how to name. A quiet strength, a presence that lingers, a space in their life that no one else could fill. But by then, something even more important will have happened. You'll have changed. You won't be the parent who's desperate to be chosen again. You'll be the parent who now chooses, with calm, with wisdom, and with self-respect, what kind of relationship you're willing to have. Not because you're bitter, not because you want to teach them a lesson, but because you finally understand your worth is not up for debate. And if they come back, you'll welcome them, not to reclaim the past, but to build something new, something better, something built on mutual respect. And if they don't, you'll still be standing, still blooming, still full of quiet power. Because this story was never about them coming back. It was about you coming home to yourself. And now I want to leave you with this. There is no expiration date on your worth. Not after 60. Not after 70. Not ever. You're not invisible. You're not forgotten. You are simply entering a stage of life that demands a different kind of strength. A quieter kind. A wiser kind. A strength that says, I am still here, and I matter. Let that be the truth you carry forward. And if this message spoke to you today, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Share your thoughts, your story, or simply write the words, I reclaimed my peace. Because that's what this journey is really about. If you found value in this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. There are so many of us in this season of life, and every share, every click helps this message reach someone else who needs to hear that they're not alone. You are not a forgotten chapter. You are the author of what comes next. Here's to living with purpose, with pride, and with peace. Because your story is still being written, and it's going to be beautiful.